Morning everybody, how are y'all doing today? I'm doing great myself, but unfortunately, I have to do something I never thought I would have to do. And that is, of course, talk about Mr. Rich from ReviwTechUSA. Now, we all know, if you've watched Rich for any period of time, he has had a lot of bad takes in the past. Especially when it comes to consoles, because, he was basically begging Sony not to port Bloodborne to PC. And honestly, I thought that was going to be the end of it, because, for the last 7 years ever since then, nothing has really been going too poorly. At least when it comes to him fanboying for Sony, but recently it's gotten a little out of hand, and of course now he has put out this video that a bunch of my fellow YouTubers have covered already that I'm going to be talking about today. And that is of course this video where he takes the stance that all the PlayStation fanboys love to take, that being of course that the Series S is a bottleneck and is holding back the gaming industry, especially that poor PS5. But I don't think we need to do much more of an intro. I guarantee you guys have probably seen Fritz's video on this by now, so yeah, let's get into it.
Birds have breasts, they have very nice breasts, their breasts are on their chest, they have bird breasts.
Your favorite man with an ass is now on Cameo. You can get your own personalized video message sent directly from me to you. Links in my Cameo below in the description. I look forward to seeing you there.
The Xbox Series S. I actually secretly love the console now, which isn't a secret because I've been very public about my love for the Xbox Series S. But in the beginning, and well, my fears were justified, I had concerns about its limited compute power.
Rich, every console that has ever been made has limited compute power. Hell, even PCs have limited compute power. And I find it very ironic you say, oh, I love the Series S, when this whole video is gonna be you dunking on it for no reason other than you wanted a video topic for today. Because you have defended this thing time and time again in the past from people like Boogie2988 who had a horrible take on the Series S. Hell, Frit managed to edit your two videos together in a way that you literally argued against yourself. He did the same thing with Griffin during the 4090 thing. But let's see what his concerns are about the limited compute power.
I'm like, this console has actually slightly less compute performance than the PS4 Pro. And it's now considered a current gen or next gen console.
No, Rich. I don't think you understand what you're talking about here. Compute performance relates to the CPU of a device. See, what you're thinking of is teraflops. The Series S has fewer teraflops than the One X and the PS4 Pro. However, teraflops mean nothing in relation to gaming performance, and the Series S is the perfect example of that. Because last I checked, the PS4 Pro and Xbox One X can't do any games at 120 FPS. And last I checked, games were getting canceled on those consoles because these new games couldn't be run on those, but yet they can still be run on the Series S. But just get ready, guys, he's gonna bring this up a lot.
What's gonna happen down the line when games push the hardware more? When less games are cross-generation? What's gonna happen with the Xbox Series S then? And a lot of people, even people who develop games, got very angry at me for saying that. But guess what? The armchair engineer was right. The Xbox Series S is a bottleneck and is going to hold back the 9th generation unless Microsoft changes its mind and says that games are not required to be developed for both the Series S and Series X.
Yes, the armchair engineer was right. Not the actual developers who know what they're talking about. No. The armchair engineer who sits on YouTube, kisses birds, and plugs his Cameo all day. He was the one who's right all along. But wait until you guys see exactly how he proves that he was right, because that's going to be very, very interesting. But before we move on, I just want to say, why the hell would Microsoft make it so that developers don't have to develop for the Series S? People are buying a next generation console to play games on it. If Microsoft releases a brand new console and then games immediately stop being released on it, do you know what that would do to Microsoft's reputation? It would be even farther in the gutter than it already is, and there would probably be a ton of lawsuits on their hands. Because the whole Series S marketing point is an extremely affordable next generation console. Next generation means it can play all the next generation games. Why would they not make developers release a port for that console as well? That would be a disaster.
So video effects artist Ian McClure, who worked on the Xbox Series X and S game I Am Fish at Bossa and also on the Surgeon Simulator series, was sitting down with Jeff and said that, yeah, the Xbox Series S is going to be a big problem for this generation.
So because a visual effects artist who worked on I Am Fish and Surgeon Simulator, which both look like PS2 games that were on iPads, said the Xbox Series S was going to be a problem, that automatically means that the console as a whole is a bottleneck. Microsoft lied about it being next generation and the whole thing just needs to be shut down. Rich, are you kidding me? Do you not verify your sources before you make a video? You are talking to a visual effects artist. That dude has nothing to do with the optimization of a game. Also, like I just said, Surgeon Simulator was on the damn iPad. It looks like a PS2 game, and I Am Fish also looks like a PS2 game. Those games could probably run on a PS2. This guy has no idea what he's talking about. And if this is the case that, oh, it's so hard for developers to optimize for the Series S, then how the hell because, Modern Warfare 2 came out today as of recording this video. It's probably yesterday at the time of the video being released. But how has Activision been able to put the last 3 Call of Duty games on the old gen consoles if this is an issue? Because the Call of Duty games look 100 million times better than the games this developer works on, and they have no trouble whatsoever. Like, Godrich, how hungry for content were you?
And this is what he had to say. Initially, Jeff said most of the games also come out to PC and already have to cover a wide variety of configurations. And Ian responded with, it might sound broken, but the reason you're hearing it a lot right now is because many developers have been sitting in meetings for the past year desperately trying to get the Series S launch requirements dropped. Studios have been through one development cycle where the Series S turned out to be an albatross around the neck of production, and now that games are firmly being developed with new consoles in mind, meaning they're not going to be cross-generation anymore, teams don't want to repeat the process.
All I heard there was developers are getting lazy. They only want to have to make 1 port for a console and not 2, so they're going and crying to Microsoft about it. Basically, you're saying the devs don't want to do their job. Because look, I understand, devs work very hard. They try to make the game the best it can be. But if developers are seriously complaining about having to make more than 1 port for different variations of a console, that's just pure laziness. Imagine if I was in my English class and my teacher announced, okay guys, we're gonna have 2 essays and they're due in like a month or whatever, but they're both due on the same day. And one of them is very easy and one of them is very difficult. It might be a little annoying that I have to do the extra work, but guess what? As a student, it's my job. And the difference is I either get an A on one and an F on the other, or I get 2 A's. And I have a whole month to do it. Like, I'm given plenty of time beforehand. And that's actually a luxury that developers have that I don't have in this analogy. They can push back when their game comes out if they need more time to optimize it. As a student, I wouldn't have that luxury in that situation. If they have a problem, then they can go ahead and just not release the game on that platform. Let's see how that goes for them.
Now we talked about how 4A Games, who brought Metro Exodus to the Series S, said the GPU presents challenges for future games. Axel Knighting of id Software said this back in 2020. I know I've quoted this a bunch of times before, but it's still very pertinent. Also, it always scaled on PC is nonsense. Every AAA game in the past decade or so has their assets made once so they run on a minimum spec. Increasing sample counts a bit here and there for high settings isn't what you could truly have done with more power.
Yeah, and want to know what's funny about this quote, Rich? This was said by the guy before the Series S came out. This was 2 months before the console even released. This guy had no idea how it was actually gonna go. All he could do was look at the specs on paper. Also, once again, plenty of games have still, to this day, been released cross-generation. Games are still getting released on last gen to this day, even Call of Duty games. And guess what? The Series S is a next-gen console. It's gonna be okay.
Minimum spec matters. So basically what he's saying is they have to make the core of the game work on the weakest set of hardware, and then they just put a prettier veneer on top if your PC can handle it. But the core game, the core gameplay they have to think about the weakest hardware to make that game work. And then if you have a more powerful PC, they'll slap on some better lighting, they'll slap on some ray tracing, some better tessellation.
Okay, and why can't this be done with the consoles? Why can't the Series S be the base version and then the Series X and the PS5 have just upgraded versions of that base Series S version? You know, I'm not a game developer or anything, but if that's how it works with PC and console games are developed on PC, then why can't it work that way?
That's not a true next-gen game, is what Axel is trying to say, and I understand that and get it, and it is a concern. So I'm going to make a prediction. If Microsoft caves to developers' demands because they're afraid that developers may say, okay, we're just not going to bring any games to the Series S or X if you force us to make games for the Series S because we don't want your weak hardware holding us back, Microsoft is going to change the requirement. They're going to say, all right, you don't need to make the games for the Series S anymore. And guess what at that point? It's just how it is. The Series S is dead.
Yeah, like I said earlier, they're not going to shut down support for a console after only 2 years of the thing existing. Especially if it's just because a bunch of developers don't want to put in a little bit of extra work to make a port for it. And if developers don't put their games on Xbox when they were originally supposed to, then, you know, that's going to be a huge loss for them. If they want to lose out on a ton of extra money simply out of laziness, then that's on them. But trust me when I say, dude, Microsoft can be stupid at times, but they are not stupid enough to pull the plug on the Series S. If the developers that PlayStation fanboys love to make fun of could put out 3 versions of the game for the last generation, 2 versions for this generation, and a PC version, then I'm sure any slightly competent third-party developer shouldn't have too much issue, especially if the games are only going to be on next gen.
Because what is making the Series S successful right now, and this is why Microsoft is not backing down and succumbing to developers' pressure yet, even though I have a feeling they might, is because that's what is making the Series S sell. It's a value proposition where for $299, you get a AAA gaming console that brings you, okay, the graphics are cut down, frame rates are cut down, resolutions cut down, but you're still getting AAA games on an affordable 9th gen console.
Yes, that is in fact the value proposition of the Series S, and it has been delivering on that for the last 2 years. Even with those quote-unquote true next-gen games that are not on the older generations. The best example is Flight Simulator. People could say, oh, well, Flight Simulator's not a game, it's a simulator. It's still one of the most demanding games ever made, and it runs perfectly fine on a Series S. If Flight Simulator can run on a Series S, there is no excuse for any other game to not be able to run on it.
If developers are no longer required to make the games scale for both the Series S and X, what do you think is going to happen? None of the games you're going to want, or the AAA games, are no longer going to come to the Series S, and it's going to get a bunch of, like, Terrarias and games made for kids, and that's it. It's dead. Its value proposition is out the window because you're not getting the same games anymore, so you're better off just spending the money and getting a digital PlayStation 5. I know that's going to piss off a lot of people that I said it, but it's the truth.
This is the perfect time to bring up a little fun fact. Did you guys know that the Series S runs more games at 120 FPS than the PlayStation 5? That's right, the weaker console that costs $200 less runs more games at 120 FPS than the PS5. Let that one sink in. If nothing else I have said up to this point proves that the Series S is just fine and isn't a bottleneck, that right there should prove my point.
Get a PS5 digital for $399. It has the same hardware as a PS5 with a disk drive, so it's just as capable, and you don't have to worry about games not coming to your console. Whereas Microsoft with the Series S, you buy a Series S, and if they cave to this and say, okay, the games don't have to be on both the Series S and X, you're always going to have to wonder, oh, this new game is coming out. Is it going to come to the Series S? Oh, this new game's coming out. Oh man, it's not coming to the Series S because they can't get the game to work.
But clearly developers can get the game to work, and they probably will be able to for the next several years. They're just complaining to Microsoft because they're being lazy. I mean, by this whole argument's logic, when the Xbox One X and the PS4 Pro came out, they should have stopped making game ports for the base Xbox One and PS4. But that didn't happen. And do you know why? Because the base Xbox One and PS4 were still a part of that generation and could still run the games. Nobody needs to fear games not coming to the Series S. It's always going to happen. Trust me.
I think Microsoft, they probably already are, is regretting the decision that they didn't do what Sony did and just make a cheaper diskless version of the Series X. Because developers now are saying, we can't work with this thing. It's not powerful enough.
Again, they can work with it, they just don't want to because they don't want to put in as much effort. Also, something tells me Microsoft isn't regretting anything. The Series S has been selling like hotcakes, so I think it's okay.
So to all the people out there who even unfollowed me on social media platforms because I was saying the same thing that actual developers who know how to code are saying, how do my nuts taste? Do they taste delicious? Because I was right.
They taste like pony salt, since you asked. But anyway, guys, that's gonna do it for this video. Basically, what we learned today is Rich was right all along. You know, apparently a single developer complaining about having to make a port for a console that a game could easily run on, who doesn't even work on optimization, and an id developer talking about the Series S 2 months before it even came out, that automatically proves that the Series S is a bottleneck, even though it runs more games at higher frame rates than the PS5 does. But in all seriousness, thank you all so much for watching. Like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't like it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I will catch you all next time.